Hello, my name is Aya Yeshe. I'm the director of Bodhicitta Foundation Nuns Training Center in Nagpur, Samtanagar, and also the director and founder of Bodhicitta Foundation India. We have a women's job training center, a girls' hostel, tuition centers around Nagpur, and a food program. So I'm really honored to be here speaking at the International Women's Buddhist Conference. And hello to our friends on YouTube who are also joining to hear this event on early Buddhist nuns and women in Buddhism. So much of Buddhism is his story, not her story. So it's wonderful to be here with other women and men who care about women's well-being, to share in the stories of Buddhist women. So there are many Buddhist women in the life of the Buddha who were instrumental. Women have always been the main supporters of the Buddha Sasana, and they have fed the Sangha, they have attained enlightenment, they have been inspiring teachers and donors of the Dhamma. And under the Buddha, women who had previously been regarded as chattels or just merely for, the continuation of one's line, were valued as human beings, full human beings with the potential for awakening, for arahatship, or in the case of Mahayana, as potential Buddhas to be. And they took up roles of leadership in the Bhikkhuni Sangha and the lay community. They nourished the Fourfold Sangha. They commissioned stupas and statues and text printings, and they preserved the Dhamma and the Vinaya. So it's time that we remember these early pioneers of the Dhamma. So first and foremost, we know Mahapajapati Gotami, the Buddhist adopted mother, who walked many hundreds of kilometers with the other Shakyan women and proved that women could also live the renounced life. Many women whose husbands had already taken full ordination, and thanks to the intervention of Ananda, who said to the Buddha, I think a lot of people misunderstand why the Buddha would have hesitated to allow women into the Sangha. It wasn't because women are less capable, it's because at the time monks were living in the wild with no housing, open to the elements, and he wasn't sure whether women could live like that, whether they'd be safe from physical molestation, and so forth. So he realized that he needed a different kind of setup for nuns, which is housing, security, living more in groups than as individuals. So, Mahapajapati arrived with her feet bleeding and asked the Buddha to give her admission into the monastic Sangha. And the Buddha expressed his doubt a few times. And then Ananda intervened and said, can women attain awakening? Can they attain the fruits of once returner, stream enterer, no more returner, and arhat? And the Buddha said, yes, they can. And then Ananda said, so why are you not allowing this woman who has, kept you alive since childhood, allowing her to reach that most profound of states and give her the great joy and freedom of becoming a bhikkhuni? And I think also the Buddha perhaps worried how women who were not viewed as equal human beings at that time would be accepted into the Sangha, accepted by monks. So some sources say he gave the 8 Garudamas and predicted that the life of the Buddha's teachings would be shortened. But actually, many early text experts like Bhante Sujato question whether the 8 Garudamas are actually real and authentic, or whether they were added later on. And for those who say that the Buddha never planned to have a female bhikkhuni lineage, once Mara appeared to him in one of the suttas and said, okay, it's time for you to pass away now. You've taught everyone. And the Buddha said, long before he even started the Bhikkhuni Sangha, he said to Mara, I will not pass away until I have established the fourfold Sangha. Meaning monks, nuns, yogi householders, and female yogini householders. So it shows that the Buddha always planned to have a monastic Sangha, and that the Sangha is not complete. The Buddha said the Sangha is not, a land is not a place where Dharma flourishes, a central land, until there is the presence of fully ordained monks and nuns. And that shows you that we need fully ordained nuns for a place to be where the Dharma flourishes. So the Buddha gladly granted his mother full ordination, and she became the first bhikshuni who trained other nuns, the inspiring head of the Sangha, and soon attained enlightenment. And one of the statements in the sutras about Gotami, Mahapajapati Gotami Theri, the Buddha said, there are fools who doubt that women too can grasp the truth, meaning liberation. Gotami, show your spiritual power, that they might give up their false views. And this is in the Gotami Upadana, verse 178 in the suttas. Of course, we know Venerable Padachara, the nun foremost in keeping the Vinaya, who was married to a man, and on giving birth to her second child, expressed a wish to go and see her family. But there was a forest fire, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but basically her husband went ahead to find out what was going on, and he didn't return. So I think she was on her way to give birth, and then finally she gave birth, and her husband went ahead to check it was safe and didn't return. So she picked up her newborn child and her toddler and went near the river on the path to her parents' house and found her husband dead, bitten by a snake. And then she saw that the river was very high and was concerned that she wouldn't be able to cross. So she started to walk with her newborn held high above her arms. And she told her young child to stay on the other side of the river until she came to get him. But unfortunately, halfway across the river, an eagle came down because there was a flood and there was lots of corpses of, dead animals and so forth that had been swept away. An eagle came down and swooped and captured her baby. And she was screaming and waving her arms, and her young child, who was waiting on the other shore, thought she was calling to him. And sadly, that child entered the flood and got carried away as well. So upon reaching the other side, Padachara had lost her husband and her two children all in one day. And then she got to her parents' house and found that their house had burned down in a forest fire. So she was absolutely devastated and kind of insane. And it was the Buddha who showed her kindness and brought her back to her senses and said, that impermanence is part of life, and that samsara is full of suffering and not a secure refuge. And she soon became the nun foremost in Vinaya practice and attained liberation. So being a Buddhist nun was not an experience of misery and renunciation or deprivation, but a new and exciting opportunity for women to be more than just addendums to men's lives, for them to pursue their awakened spiritual potential and their own identity, and to receive education and be free from domestic drudgery. So it was a really new and exciting option for women to seek and pursue their spiritual potential and to be free from the control of husbands and fathers and so forth. Kisa Gotami is another example of a woman who was criticized and not loved and not cared for because she wasn't very attractive. And her only value was seen to be producing a male heir. And when she finally gave birth to a child, he was a beautiful baby and she loved him dearly. And she was suddenly given respect and acceptance, and sadly her child died. And in full grief, she carried her dead baby's rotting corpse around, asking if anyone had any medicine. And the Buddha said, go to the house of someone and get sesame oil from someone who hasn't died. And this was the medicine of understanding impermanence. She really came to understand. In every house, she heard the story of some family member or friend who had died. That no one's life was without loss. And she had the deep insight into impermanence and non-self and attained liberation. And then there was the beautiful Queen Kema, the wife of King Bimbasar. She was enjoying her life of pleasure and beauty, and was a bit afraid to go near the Buddha because she heard that he wasn't fond of luxury and enjoyment. But she adorned herself with sandalwood and makeup and gold and went and listened to the Buddha. And the Buddha created the psychic perception of a beautiful woman who then aged in front of her and turned into dust in front of her very eyes. And she understood her own nature and became liberated, an arhat there on the spot due to past merit. And because she became an arhat, she had to become a monastic and with King Bimbisara's permission ordained, because if you don't pay respect to an arhat, apparently you create really bad karma, which is why she became a nun. She became the Buddha's foremost female disciple, nun disciple in wisdom. And then there is Nandutara, who became a renowned speaker among the Jainas, and then was finally convinced of the truth of the teachings by Sariputra. There was the nun Subhadra, who killed her evil and dangerous husband and became a nun and lived a life of penance and attained liberation. There was the lay woman Kujutara, who was disabled. She had a twisted spine, and she had perfect recall of the Buddhist teachings and brought the teachings every day to her mistress, who was in the royal house. Sorry, someone just called me. And then there was Shamavati, who was foremost of the lay disciples in goodwill, full of metta and extremely generous to the Buddha. There was Visakha, who was also the wife of a king and foremost in generosity. There was Venerable Vada Kundalakesa, who was a Jain ascetic. She was a young, impetuous girl who fell in love with a man who was being executed for stealing. She bribed the guards and fell in love and said she would kill herself if she couldn't marry him. But he was still a rascal and tried to steal her jewelry by throwing her off a cliff, but he made the mistake of telling her beforehand that he was going to kill her. And she said, please let me pay respect to you, dear husband. Sorry, somebody's still trying to call me. And she pushed him off before he could. So through regret and guilt, she tore her hair out at the root, and her hair grew back very curly. And for 50 years, she was a wanderer. She would take a rosewood stick and draw a line in the sand and then make people debate her. And she said whoever won, she would join their sect. And Shariputra one day asked her, what is the one? And he said, the one is a single meaningful line that leads to peace, and it is better than 1,000 useless words. Then there was Sona, of the many children, who became a nun. She was always giving birth. She had 10 children, always arranging the marriage of her children and her grandchildren, and they were her whole life. And years before, her husband had ordained. And then finally, in faith, she turned her wealth over to her children. But unfortunately, they neglected her and considered her a religious fanatic. They didn't understand her devotion to Dharma. And she realized her motherly love was based on expectation, and security in old age, that it was conditional and transactional. And the nuns criticized her. She couldn't seem to do anything right because, ordaining as a nun is a whole reorientation in identity. And then she became foremost in effort and attained liberation. So it's just a beautiful story to show you that at any age you can attain liberation. And then there was the Buddha's half-sister called Sundari Nanda, who was so beautiful. She was graceful, and she went forth not out of faith, but to be with family. She was still attached to beauty and popularity, and not living the ideals of a nun. But the Buddha talked to all the nuns and uplifted and inspired her. He also showed her a vision of a beautiful woman, then aging and turning to dust in front of her, and truly understanding impermanence and the unclean nature of the body. She realized freedom from birth and death. So there's also the example of Yeshe Sogyal, the queen of Tibet, who became the wife of Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism from India to Tibet in the 8th century with the monk Shantarakshit. And she became a great translator. She became enlightened in her own right and a transmitter of the Dharma. She and Padmasambhava buried many teachings in various caves around India and Nepal. And she also faced doubt and gossip. She was raped when she was meditating in remote Himalayan caves. But because of the power of her energy, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but because of the power of her energy, the rapists realized they'd made a huge mistake and asked her forgiveness and became her students. And it just shows that there are so many stories of lay women and nuns who have become Buddhist teachers and upholders of the Dharma, and also who have commissioned beautiful monasteries, beautiful stupas, who have been upholders and supporters of the Dharma for generations. That it's time that we supported full ordination and nuns training. The situation of nuns in Nagpur and Maharashtra and India is not great. The lay people control the monasteries and throw the nuns out, so they can't build community and they can't find stability. So no young women or educated women would choose to ordain. Only older women with no options ordain, or women who are going through divorce and so forth, or women with a lot of faith and their own resources. So Bodhicitta Foundation is trying to start a nuns training center. It would be really good if you didn't just call on us when you want us to do Bhujandan or, speak at an event like this. It would be really good to see the faces of people from Avaz and from the Ambedkarite engineering brotherhood and the Mihila Mandal turning up to our events to support nuns, to offer robes, food, medicine, to help us buy land, and not just hope that foreigners will, have a magical money tree growing in their backyard. It would be good if people would not just practice the appearance of Buddhism, but actually have a daily meditation practice, and not just have it as a social and political identity, but a really deep, profound Dharma practice, and seek liberation once and all from birth and death. Because whatever caste you're born in, whether high or low, abolishing caste is fantastic, and getting human rights is very important, and it's the teaching of Baba Sahib and Buddha. But even if you end caste, you're still with a deluded mind in samsara, and we need to get out of samsara. That is the ultimate aim of the Dharma, as well as justice and brotherhood and sisterhood in the short term. So it would be good if, I've been here 17 years and I'm still struggling and have very little support from the Ambedkarite community, even though I've given 17 years of my life and 1 crore rupees to the Ambedkarite community. I'm still struggling just to raise enough money to have a nuns training center. So please help us, and please come to our events, and don't just invite us when you want us, but come to our events and support us and do social work and do meditation and study and keep alive the Dhamma. That is my request to you. Thank you. Namo Buddhaya. May all beings be happy, and may the potential of women be acknowledged everywhere. And may men also realize that their well-being is connected to women's well-being. We are interconnected. Marriages, families, communities can only be happy when women too have education, equality, brotherhood and sisterhood, and human rights, equality and human dignity. And that means helping with domestic labor, helping with raising children so that women can get education and have careers and develop their own identity and have physical autonomy to choose their own life. Thank you. Namo Buddhaya.